computer. And this is our 8th session of part 2 of the NLP. What is it? NLP coaching diploma. And today's date is the 14th of December 2021. So welcome everyone to that. And we were just inviting Joe along with us virtually. So Kevin, have you got a message to share from Joe?
Yeah, well, let me see if I can get it up. If I can get the technology working. Can you see the video?
No, I can see your email at the moment.
Hi everybody, I just wanted
to stop it. I'll work it out while everyone's in their breakout rooms, and we will share the lovely best wishes from Joe.
Okay.
Because I can do that. Okay, so welcome everyone. It looks like perhaps Simone hasn't been able to join us, or maybe she'll pop in, just checking there's no one else in the waiting room. No. Okay, well, we'll kick off. As always, we have a lot to fit in on this, our 8th and final session of part 2. We are looking today, we're just going a bit of a consolidation really. You've got all these tools, and what are we going to do with them, and how can we make best use of them? So that's the focus of today. But as per usual, we'll start off just with a quick settling in. And again, it was really lovely talking to some of you and saying how useful you found it as a technique, just to simply find yourself in that space now, today, here, and allow your mind to settle. Allow all those things that may not be so useful to you in the next couple of hours to just drift away, to find a space, to find somewhere else. Just let them go. As you bring your awareness to your breathing, such a useful anchor to realize that every time you breathe out, you can let go of those things that you don't find useful at the moment. And that with every breath in, you can bring in fresh air to all those places to ready yourself for learning. Breathing in, renewing, refreshment, replenishing, engaging those learning parts so they're ready to receive and build on all the learning you've already had, so there'll be new learning. And just find yourself sat where you're sat. Notice whatever weight or pressure there is on your seat or on your feet. And just realize you're here in that learning seat, that place, that posture, that's just right for learning. And perhaps when you get into that place that's just right for learning, you jiggle around a little and just feel your body to be in that place. Notice where your head's most usefully positioned for learning and for being in this virtual hub, community, space for learning. And then when you're ready, just take another breath and open your eyes if they've been closed, and just gaze around your screen and do whatever you can to make contact in this virtual world, in this magical learning place we're in. That's lovely. And it's delightful to see you all.
It is indeed, and it's our final session, but we're going to continue in the way in which we've done before by just having a quick recap on what we did last time and allowing you to ask any questions, anything that you're not sure about. Do you need a little bit more information? And if you remember, the topic for us last time was meta-programs. We started with the metaphor of the glass half full, half empty, optimist, pessimist, and then we shared with you, and we shared them in 2 groups. So there are a set of meta programs primarily around motivation, obviously towards and away from, internal, external, sameness, difference, etc. And we took you through some of those. We spent quite a bit of time focusing on towards and away from, which we think is a particularly significant one. And then we moved on to look at, well, we looked at one of them, I think, in the session itself, and then we shared a lot more information on some of the working style ones in the consolidation afterwards.
So I think from those people who've done the online, you seem to get it. There wasn't any, unless we've missed it. I don't think there were any posted questions, but do ask us now if there is anything that you'd like to know more about. No, not even Shell. Shell, I must say, we've got lovely feedback of how useful your questions have been for everyone. And so do keep on posting and asking those questions.
And in terms of feedback, there was some great feedback from Joe, who I spoke to yesterday. One was that how much she'd got from working with the individuals she'd worked with on the program, and you know who you are. And the other thing was how useful she found meta programs. It was a kind of real revelation. Joe was very, very complimentary about lots of things, but I think meta programs particularly was something that she'd really found useful in terms of understanding people and their motives. That was really nice to hear. And I was recommending a book because she wanted to read more on it, which was Words That Change Minds, which I think we mentioned in the session. And that's a book by a lady called Shelley Rose Charvet.
I hope we put it on the online as reference as well, or did we miss doing that? Does anyone have recollection?
We probably did, actually.
I think we did.
Yeah. If you get a chance to hear her speak, she's great. She's very, very entertaining, as well as lots of really useful stuff as well.
John, did you have a comment or a question?
I watched a couple of Rose's videos yesterday, and yeah, she's very entertaining, dynamic, great. One thing I found interesting, well, obviously you can't get too much of her lab thing without paying for it, because it's quite protected. But one thing I found interesting was she said that it's not like other personality type profiling, because she says everyone works differently in different contexts. It's the context bit that I found interesting. So seems to be the implication you could be running one meta program in one context, say buying a pair of trousers, but you'll run a different meta program if you're buying a car. It's dependent on context. I found that interesting, that sometimes these languages and behaviours don't translate between different contexts. You might be different at school than you are at holiday or at work, that kind of thing.
I think you would certainly, that it can be very context dependent, but also what we found for experience, and a lot of people would say, if you've got a tendency to be strongly at one end of the scale or the other, that tendency is likely to permeate across more context. If you're sort of in the middle and you're good at both, then the context may be more, may be more critical in which one you choose. So it's always it's a really powerful tool to go really deep into a specific context. You have one communication with one person, what was going on then can be very useful exploration. But if you find someone strongly away from, for instance, you will find that permeating in our experience across many things. Would you concur, Kevin? Is that?
Yeah, I would. And I did my lab practitioner training some years ago now. And when you do a session with an assessment session with somebody, you always do it in a very, very specific context. So, it wouldn't just be in a work context, for example, it would be in, motivating my staff, something narrower than just a big setting, as it were. And that's the way it's done there. So the conclusions that you come up with are, in the context of communicating with groups of people, let's say, your meta programs are this, this, and this.
Very good. So I hope you're all still discovering about yourself and noticing in others, and you'll keep sharing some feedback on that. It sounds like you're all very settled on the programs then, which is great. And we were just going to mention quickly about the lovely calls we've had, and what a great opportunity to just have those few minutes towards the end of the part 2 to catch up with you. And I think both Kevin and I were very delighted to hear so many of you have found it enjoyable, and so much learning that's made a difference for yourselves. And that mixture of stretch and different things, and a bit of challenge along the way, was a key point coming across. There were so many people saying about the group how lovely it's been this time, and I think part 2 has been maybe more so. People have cross-worked within this hub, and you've got to know each other better, and how the value of the practice sessions themselves, not only in getting to know each other as, wow, everyone's so different and so lovely, but that's when the pennies dropped, or the learning really happened. That it was one thing listening to us, and in the sessions, you know, we deliver and we chat about it, and then it's perhaps when it really comes to bear, which makes perfect sense, doesn't it, is when either someone's facilitating that process with you as the coachee, or in the facilitation yourself, when you see the impact it has and the difference it makes. So that's really wonderful, and I think it's, you know, well done everyone, because I know many of you felt so nervous, not surprisingly, going with these things for the first time with people you don't really know that well, and you went for it, and the benefits. So there must be a learning for life in that, you know, going for it, putting your heart and soul into it, having a go, making yourself perhaps a little vulnerable along the way. Oh, what if I get it wrong? Well, what if you get it wrong? Hey.
The other thing that was fantastic to hear was not just how you were benefiting from putting your coaching skills into practice, but actually the benefit that you as a client were gaining from the coaching interventions that you were being worked through with. You know, people were saying they experienced some real changes in their behaviors and some of their thinking patterns, etc., because of the work that you had done with them as a coach. So, you know, that was really encouraging to hear as well. So you've had some free coaching on the program as well, which added bonus.
Yeah, and even though we're coming to the end of this sort of formal bit of part 2, I do hope you keep in contact. And once I know that people are willing to volunteer, and I know time's precious as well, but given all the benefits for yourself and the person you're coaching, you know, do keep that network live in terms of wanting a go, or I've got something I want to work through. You know, is there anyone out there who could just, you know, give me half an hour's coaching and see what happens? It's a great way to continue learning and consolidating your skills.
And with that in mind, I think the other point that came through very strongly is about taking time to practice, because, you know, these are skills, and therefore your skill set will improve with practice. So the more opportunities that you can create to do some anchoring and submodalities and strategies and all the Milton patterns and everything that we've done on the program, you know, the better you'll get at it. It's as simple as that, really.
We had the opportunity, just some of us, to start talking about, well, how are you going to use it, and that difference. And a lot of people were saying, well, I'm not specifically wanting to be a coach per se, sell my time as a coach, and I'm using it more in an organizational setting. And because of that split within the group, we will be doing an activity later where we're looking at things from a different perspectives. So I just wondered if we could, I don't know, a simple show of hands, that difference. Are you wanting to be a coach and use these things as a coach, whatever that means to you? Or are you utilizing all the NLP skills and everything else in an organization, leadership, management situation? So first of all, which of you are like coach is your primary, you're going to be utilizing it? So Lala, John and Chrissy. Lala, John and Chrissy.
And Anita, I think.
And Anita, thank you, Anita. Thank you, Kevin. Okay, and would that mean everyone else is using it in an organizational context? Lovely. So
yeah, great.
Just so I can get the group in.
That's a good 4-4 split too. That's good.
4-5 even.
Is that the right number?
Or 5.
Yeah, we've lost someone. So that was Jake and Mark.
Counting skills always useful, isn't it?
Yeah, too pedantic, I'm sorry.
Every AD person went, no, you're wrong.
Yeah.
Well spotted. Okay. So
Excellent.
any other questions just on roundups or anything before we move on to just more consolidation? No? Okay. All right. So we're
gonna share a couple of slides now that just put things into context and give a really nice summary of coaching, really. So let me find. So this is one that we have put together some time ago, and so this is what we call a spectrum of well-being, and it really illustrates that, you know, this is a kind of an artificial distinction between the two, but there is this idea about, you know, therapy and coaching. What's the difference? Now, for us, a way of thinking about this is that therapy, first of all, is what we label as more remedial. And what we mean by that is, if you get somebody coming to you and they have a particular problem that they want rid of, they want to overcome, they've got particular barriers in place, then, you know, we would call these things don't matter really at the end of the day, but we might describe that as being therapy. Yeah. Coaching, there is a distinction there where people will come to you and will say, things are generally okay in my life, but I want more. You know, I want to achieve these particular outcomes, these particular objectives. So if we were pinned down and had to make that distinction between coaching and therapy, coaching is generally thought of as more generative, you know, in other words, adding to. Therapy is thought about taking something away. Now, you know, it's a fairly meaningless, in some ways, distinction. And the important thing is really that the skill set that you need in both is pretty much the same. So this is something, again, let me just run through on this one. So this really identifies some of the key stages in the process of coaching and therapy, and you'll be familiar with them because we focused on them and focused on the particular skills and knowledge around these. So first 3 stages, when you're working with somebody, establish rapport, agree the outcomes, and then there's quite a bit of information gathering and sharing. Now, one key thing then in terms of the NLP approach is to what we call loosen the model. And of course, the client is coming to you with a model of the world, their model of the world, which contains certain beliefs, for example, some of which will be holding them back, limiting them in some way. And one great thing that you can do, rather than sort of confront these beliefs head on, although that's always an option, is to get them to gently loosen and gently begin to doubt that limiting belief that's holding them back. So in the early time that you are spending with a client, you're finding out about what is in their model of the world, because it's their model of the world which they are operating from, which is why they have the problem or why they are not achieving the results that they want. So your job as an NLP coach is to find out what's in that model of the world, and then the bits that are not working for them, how can you loosen them up? And the technique that we would use there, of course, is reframing and using some of the meta model challenges, for example, you know, challenging those generalizations, etc. Okay, then once we have done the loosening up, it's then about deciding what kind of intervention would be useful for the client at this moment. Is it some anchoring? Are you going to anchor a resourceful state, for example? Is it going to be some work around strategies? That's for you to decide. And then the final two stages, and again, remember, these are crucial. The first one is to test that the change work, the intervention that you have done, has been successful. So do what you can to test it out in that here and now moment. And check, when we talk about congruence and alignment, if a change has taken place, it's important to check that the client is fully congruent with that change. Because of course, if a change takes place, it will impact different parts of the system. So let's say, for example, one of the changes they were wanting to make was some sort of behavioral pattern change about work-life balance, let's say. Yeah, it's important to check that that would work in the context of home and at work. You know, is it congruent for the whole person? So that's what we mean by testing. And then the final part then is future pacing, which is about taking the client into some imagined future event where they can hypothetically test out whatever the change has been. Okay, so that was a nice little summary of the process. Do we have any particular questions on that?
I've got a couple before Shell gets in. I presume you've got a feedback loop here. If you get to the test and check congruence alignment bit or the future pace bit, and it suddenly goes, oh, actually, no, that's not going to fit with my life, or, you know, it's never going to work, or when I imagine this future thing, it just doesn't happen. You go back to either 4 or 5 and run it through again, I presume.
Yeah, indeed. Yeah, absolutely.
The other question was, why have you got associated and dissociated written down at the bottom?
Okay, so when we're doing any of the particular change work, for example, something like strategies, John, you want the person to be in the moment, reliving the strategy. So if it's about a strategy for buying something, you want them to be as fully immersed in that previous experience of buying something, because, you know, the steps in the strategy are in the unconscious. They're not consciously aware of what they're doing in terms of visual, auditory, kinesthetic, etc. So it's important to take them back to that time, and to do that, they have to be fully associated.
Okay.
Now, in terms of the dissociated one, and this is interesting, and we debate this quite a bit. If you are getting people to imagine some future event, you know, the well-formed outcome, for example, there is a useful perspective of them being dissociated and seeing themselves doing it.
Yeah.
Now, having said that, and again, this is kind of, I don't know about debatable. I think there is a case for saying it is useful for them to associate into an imagined new future state as well. And I know, Rita and I had a discussion about this very recently again. Do you want to add
I can see
anything?
that with the classic one is public speaking, and you can see yourself on stage with a
Yeah.
big audience,
Yeah.
or you can imagine yourself being on stage seeing the audience, and both
Yeah.
could be useful. I can see that. Yeah.
And there's two things. I think one might work. One or other might work better depending on how people use their submodalities anyway, because there's that difference anyway for different people. And I think the other aspect is there's something sort of that aspirational for or towards when you see yourself in it rather than already experiencing it. It keeps the motivation, whereas there is a potential that if you've already got it, that motivation's already sated. You feel like you've already got there. So there's something about then seeing yourself in it that allows you to progress towards it with some motivation. So it's something to play with, really, and notice, but and interesting to consider those different perspectives. What do people do naturally when you invite them to Future Pace? See yourself in that situation. What's their natural inclination, and go with that.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions on that?
I have a question.
Excellent.
Just on you.
And you did get in there.
Don't you know what my
shouted.
question is?
This is in practice, no?
So my question is just about the chart. Why is number 2 coloured orange? It's circly thing. And why are there the 2 arrows in red at the top? Sorry if you've already told us the answer to that.
Well, I can tell you the arrows at the top. I'm not sure about one. Number 2 is different. The arrows are saying that you want to build rapport, establish rapport, and continue throughout the whole activity. So it goes from the left to the right. So, in terms of checking the outcomes and reiterating the outcomes, they're things that are consistent throughout the whole process, whereas the others are specific states. Now, the different colouring for box number 2.
I'm waiting for this answer.
Oh, yeah. Well, I think it's because it's pretty important. It might be a PowerPoint thing, but well done for spotting that. I can't really think why that would be a different colour.
Can I just add something? I'm not going to attempt to answer that question, but I think it is important right throughout the process to keep reminding the client of what their original outcome was, and to keep referencing everything that you're doing against that outcome. One of the reasons for that, obviously one reason is to kind of keep it in the forefront of the person's mind, but another reason is the client can often forget what the outcome is, strangely enough. In that, some of the loosening up that you can do, which might help to remove a limiting belief, the client thinks, well, I'm really not sure why I came to see you, because of course I believe I can do this. I don't know why I bothered to come and see you. And it's this kind of amnesia that because they've moved on, because a change has taken place, they can forget what that outcome is. That's quite common, actually.
It also gives a wonderful opportunity in terms of presupposing success and all the presuppositions you can put in when you're reframing that and reiterating it back to the client. So, all the way through. And you're testing and checking it's right. And also building that expectation of success and presupposition of success as well.
Yeah.
Because when I saw you had the arrow on the outcomes, I thought it meant that they could revise the outcome as they go through. They might change what they want.
Indeed.
And it might revise.
Yeah. So that's why by either whatever if it's staying fixed, you're reinforcing it all the way through and keeping people on that focus. You're also checking it every time you present it back. You're noticing how they're reacting and responding, and if it's not quite right, you're tweaking it and changing it. And you might change all the following steps an intervention you might have considered was apt for that first outcome might change, because it is, of course, all a fluid process.
And actually, that's a really good point, because somebody might come to you with a particular outcome, which actually might be quite light and superficial. Once you get into it, you realize actually there's something much deeper. You know, let's say they came to see you about confidence in presenting. Yeah. When you get into working with them, you might uncover something that's much deeper. It's a kind of general self-confidence, self-image thing or something. So at that point, then you would kind of recontract with them. Okay, so now we're working on this other thing. So that would be important to establish with them at that point. Yeah, good point.
Okay, should we be moving
Okay.
on? Welcome, Simone. Hope you're feeling better today.
So just looking at those first three stages, particularly establish rapport, agree outcomes, information gathering. What's been interesting was, and I've mentioned this to one or two of you, I've been struggling with a back problem over the last month, really. And I had a physio session yesterday. And what was quite interesting was when you go and see any kind of professional, health professional, if you like, you know, there are some similarities in the process. So those first three stages, you know, when I went in yesterday, there was a bit of, it was only a 20-minute assessment, I have to say. So there was a quick bit of rapport building, and then, you know, establishing what are we here for kind of thing, and some information gathering. And that's kind of all there was at that stage. Because there were no interventions. That's hopefully going to come later. Now, what was interesting was, for me, this was on the back of, and I may have mentioned this to one or two of you again last week. This is an example of really bad timing on my part. Okay, so last week I was booked into a sports camp in Lanzarote. So this really tested my NLP skills last week in terms of my resilience and managing my mood state, because I spent the whole week hobbling around looking at all of the activities that I couldn't do. I'm not looking for sympathy here, by the way, but it was an interesting and challenging week. And when I was there, I was kind of reflecting on times that I'd been, you know, really fit and healthy. And I was thinking about a time many years ago when my daughters were little, and I had one in a buggy who was about a year old, I think, and the other one was about 5-year-old. And we were walking around Scarborough. Some of you will know Scarborough, North Bay. And we were walking along the front one evening, and there was some activity ahead, and some kind of commotion, and we didn't know what was happening. So we went to investigate, and as we got closer, I saw this big sign, and it said "Father's Race." And with some encouragement from my family, I was invited to join in with this father's race, primarily because the prize for winning the father's race was a huge stick of Scarborough rock. So I took my place on the start line, and as I looked to my right, I could see these shiny trainers and these sort of muscly calves, and I was a bit concerned. So I looked to my left, and there was some even shinier trainers and even more muscly legs, and I thought, oh gosh, this is going to be tough. And I looked down at my inappropriate footwear, and I thought, okay, well, let's give it a go. But you know, I had a very clear outcome in mind. I wanted to win the race. And I knew that the reason was I would get this huge stick of rock, and I would see this wonderful smiles on my daughters' faces. So I thought, okay, I'm going to do this. So there we were, waiting at the start line, and I could see in the distance there was the finish line, and there was two guys holding this tape. which, you know, you had to burst through to win. So there we were on the start line, and then the gun went off and we all lurched forward. Now, if you ever tried to run in sand, it's not the easiest thing. And there were bodies falling to the left of me, to the right of me, people struggling to move. But I carried on. And there were two guys, one either side of me. And it emerged that the three of us were going to be there at the finish. So we carried on, lung busting, moving, trying to move your feet through the sand. And as the finish line came closer, we were neck and neck, the three of us. And I thought, I've got to do something. I've got to take some kind of final action to get over that line. And then I remembered something I'd seen on all of the races that I'd been watching, that what happens when they get close to the line is they dip and they sort of throw their chest forward and get over the line first. So as the line was approaching, I saw this tape being held by these two guys. And just at the last moment, we were all neck and neck, but I dipped. And as I dipped and I looked down, I saw something amazing.
Wow. And it's amazing all that we've covered. So we, in the first part, you remember, you may recall a little slide we had of a portfolio toolkit for all that we covered in the first part. And just there's a reminder, anchoring, rapport, visualizing, and evidence criteria. Oh, sorry, that was value elicitation, and then grow and reframing. And we've added to that in part 2 with a whole other host of perhaps things that allow you to go deeper and help people more swiftly. Strategies, meta model, Milton model, meta programs, metaphors, storytelling, submodalities, hypnotic language patterns, coaching practice, language map, and all the other asides that came along with that. So we've covered an awful lot of amazing tools, and I think you have, amazing is a good word. You have been amazed by some of the results. You've been amazed by your own competence and your growing confidence in using those tools. And what we'd like you to do is just take the opportunity now to just, we're going to split you up into breakout rooms and invite you to consider a couple of things. Like we said earlier, we think it's useful to get all the people who are going to be coaching coaches and the people who are working in the business in separate groups for the consideration. So we're going to invite those of you who are concentrating on coaches, what's happening on the left-hand side here. Of all those tools, all those things that you've learned, which ones do you feel most confident to use straight away and immediately? Keep on using, you've already used it quite a bit. Conversationally, you've thrown it in at right, left and centre anytime an opportunity arises. And which ones will need some more reflection and practice? So we think it'll be really useful for you to discuss that with others. We're actually sort of pretty much in pairs when it comes to the coaches. I think that will work well. And then on the right hand side, that's for those of you who are working in the operational leadership management context. We, again, referring to those tools, which ones could you apply most easily in the organizational context? And then which ones are you currently feeling would be more of a challenge to apply? And this is a result of some of the chats we've been having to you all, and that thinking, oh, I wonder if some of it doesn't apply. So we want you to just consider that and wonder how you might apply it, and to come back to us when we debrief just to, oh, Clive's just popping out. If it's only for a moment, that's all right. Otherwise, we'll move the groups around a bit. And, you know, if there is one that comes back, and I don't see how we'd use it as in the organisation context, maybe we'll have a few moments together as a group to make suggestions on how that might work. So I'm going to open the groups now, if that makes sense to everyone. Everyone's comfortable with that brief. You may resolve it all yourself, but there may be a couple hanging over that you think might deserve a bit of group discussion. So I'm going to split you up into groups now. We're going to give you, how long, Kevin?
10 minutes.
10 minutes. We're going to give you 10 minutes. Let me change. I found something I can change that number in. I'm going to do that. Oh no, it won't let me, will it? Will it? Will it? Will it? Oh, you're going to get right. Open all rooms. 10 minutes to consider utilising those tools, the application of them in your context. Now, I think Simone, what do I do with Simone, who wasn't on that original list? I've got her. I'm going to put Simone in room 3. See you, Simone. Anita, are you getting your thing? Anita should be, oh, yeah. Yes. And Simone, you should be getting a request to go into room 3. And Clive will have a room. I'll just pause the resuming call. There we go. And Shell, yes, well done, Shell.
Fabulous.
And Simone wasn't feeling too good, so she's wisely chosen to take herself off to bed again. Thanks, Shell, for letting us know.
Okay, so we'll just do a quick review. Do we have 2 organisational groups and 1 coaching?
We do. One of those groups is Shell for the organisation. What about if we start with the other group, which had Kath, Jane and Mark? What were your considerations in terms of what you can use immediately? Did you say yes to everything?
No. But we couldn't remember everything, to be quite honest. We would have found it quite helpful to have had the list to remind ourselves, because the 3 of us were dredging it around a bit.
Oh, good point, okay. Kath.
But Jane had a very positive start, didn't you, Jane?
Always positive start. It's the finish you've got to worry about. Submodularities, anchors, mindfulness, looping, presuppositions were all in the yes. Shall I just gather everybody's? These aren't all mine. Beliefs and values, I'd forgotten. Mark remembered. Rapport building, maps and territories, perceptual positions, and the yes-no ordering system, which has a proper name, all in the yes. The ones that actually I think we were agreed on was the storytelling is quite hard to stick in the middle of a meeting. Mine was actual coaching. Seems quite a hard thing to actually do. So yeah, start that in my. It's not in their no list. It was in mine. Yes. Hypnotic language.
That was in the no. Okay, yeah.
It's quite hard to put hypnotic language in the middle of a board meeting, I suppose. Don't know. And senses and language were trickier to use. So thinking about all the different senses and language.
Yeah. Ooh. It's interesting, Jane, a couple of times there, I think you said, you know, difficult to do these in the context of a meeting. Yes, maybe, I think. There's probably lots of other opportunities, I think, in your organizational setting. You know, presentations, for example. You know, can you spice up your presentations with a bit of storytelling? And yeah, hypnotic language patterns are always interesting. We don't want to overdo them.
And presuppositions can be overdone as well, can't they? Oh, is that you mean always? When? Never? How? Can we get to the end of a sentence?
Well, presuppositions is interesting, of course, because presuppositions are really what are we presupposing when we communicate. So, you know, we're using presuppositions all the time.
Exactly.
And I think it's really powerful, the presuppositions, particularly in the written form, maybe not particularly, but you know, when you start off with an intention that we're going to achieve this, or you start off with an intention that, oh, I'm not sure if this is going to work, the language you naturally use will be presupposing that, you know, without any much. So it's really useful at the beginning of a meeting, in a presentation, when you're writing a report, to get that in your own place. What are we presupposing here? That we can do it together? Are we presupposing this is going to be a challenge and difficult? It's going to be, you know, it's just going to be such hard work. These are the things you hear. And the coaching every day is like, when you hear someone say, oh, it's going to be so difficult, coaching would be saying, oh, well, maybe some of it's going to be easier for us to do, or which are the easiest parts for us to get on with now. That would be a coaching. It's not like the formal, let's have an hour, sit down together, let's run through the whole GROW model. But if you remember when we started off with GROW, simply asking the question, what's another good example of coaching in the immediacy is, oh, I really don't want to be doing this. Well, what would you rather be doing instead? You know, I really don't want to, I really don't want to be, I'm so annoyed. I just don't want to be annoyed with that person when I hear them again. How would you rather be? Simply asking that question, in my opinion, is coaching. And it's the simple languaging skills that you've picked up. And I hazard a guess, each and every one of us in this room are starting to do that more spontaneously. We're hearing it and automatically just gently reframing it. It's not always a big challenge, you know. That's my sentiment.
Yeah, it doesn't have to be done in a formal setting. You know, any time you use one of those meta model challenges, for example, you know, somebody says every time this happens, and you say, is it really every time? You know, that's coaching.
And very useful in a meeting. I think some of you have shared in the online how, when we did the meta model, how it kept meetings on target and on focus, and kept that tight rein on things by saying, oh, what specifically, you know, and they become very they can be used quite naturally and conversationally without a label on the top of them as well. Are we convincing you? Or do I need to say it 3 times more? Can you see there's an essence of that in that, Jane, that it is possible?
Yeah, we weren't saying there wasn't. What we were saying, yes, sorry.
Less easy perhaps, less obvious, less obvious.
I wasn't in the organisation group, so maybe because I'm doing a bit of both, coaching and organisation. I have used hypnotic language patterns in my team, like the week after we learned about it. I felt a bit like mischievous doing it, but it was a double blind thing, which I think I can really see doing in a board meeting or a team meeting. Saying, well, we can do this immediately, or we could do it in 2 weeks' time. What do you think? And that's just set 2 options up, rather than them saying, well, I wasn't thinking of doing it at all, but you've just given them 2 options. That's an example which I have used recently. Yeah, it works.
Yeah.
Cheryl, you were the other organisation group.
Yeah, it's a one-man band. I think I was actually surprised at how many of the things were that I could remember were fairly immediately applicable, actually. So yeah, my list: rapport, trance or stories, values, especially strategy planning, reframing, tying up the conscious brain in order to sort of get. I'm reading something quite interesting about I think it's interesting about using Lego in strategy planning and stuff at the moment, because it sort of ties up the conscious brain, and it allows the unconscious to kind of be the creative bit, and it's a real leveler. So it's good in terms of diversity as well, and inclusion. So yeah, that was that to me. Meta programs, obviously, when having, you know, trying to figure out who you're actually negotiating with, dealing with, unpicking the processes and strategies, the TOTE model as well. And in terms of the less applicable things, I think the sort of the hypnotic stuff, but yeah, I get that trance is really valuable in terms of presentations, and anchoring is perhaps a bit more kind of way out there for thinking about staff supervision.
Yeah, it's interesting. I kind of know what Rita's going to say now. You know, anchoring comes in many forms. The one we focused on was doing kinesthetic anchoring, which was kind of like a hands-on. But again, anchoring comes in many shapes and forms. So auditory anchoring, you know, again in your presentations, stage anchoring, which John maybe knows something about as well, you know, so that when you're on the left-hand side of the stage, for example, you're talking about things that happened in the past. When you're on the right-hand side, it's a future looking, that kind of thing. That's still anchoring. Yeah. So.
And being careful, so just a useful hint around anchoring. If you've had an experience in a room, a one-to-one or a conversation, or even a board meeting that wasn't very productive, it may carry still the anchors of that energy. Or if you have a room where you've had a fantastic meeting that's gone really well, we'll utilize the fact that that room, when you bring those same people back there, they're likely to engage in a very similar state or the same degree. But so those sort of things, if you know something, particularly if it's got negative emotions attached to it, choose something else, you know, do your best to avoid reassociating for yourself and other people with those sort of things. Okay, very good. Clive, you disappeared. I don't know if you had any time to think about that one, but was there anything to add, or does that all make sense from your
I was talking to these roofer guys actually, so they may need a bit of coaching actually, because they don't look like they know what they're doing. But no, I didn't really get a chance to do it properly. Sorry.
Okay,
that's all right.
All right, let's move on to the coaching group then. So we asked sort of similar questions. What do you feel confident and comfortable to put into practice immediately, and what do you think will need a little bit more reflection and practice? So that was it Chrissy?
John and Chrissy, and then Anita and Lala.
Yeah.
So Chrissy, were you starting?
Yeah, I can start, John. I'll probably add to the discussion as we go along. I found strategies quite useful to use, you know, in a coaching session. And I've used it a couple of times now, you know, with volunteers, I'll sort of add. And the submodalities was absolutely brilliant as well, because I've practiced that with different people and also received, you know, that sort of session as well. So I've been very, very lucky in that respect. I found using visual skills very, very good. Or even you know, different parts of us. For example, when you're very heavily engaged in the head that's got the upper hand, doesn't allow, I suppose, the other parts to come through. So consequently, you feel misaligned in terms of the final message. So just separating the entities every now and then and getting somebody to imagine, well, what's the brain saying? You know, what's your heart saying? And distributing the information a little bit, you find out which is not aligned with something else, and then you can put the message back together, so you can visualize that in terms of, you know, coming up with a final statement. So I quite like that. And I suppose as well, the GROW model, getting more insight into how that can be used. I've quite enjoyed that. You know, the perceptual positions that we did right at the beginning of the sessions, that was really useful. And I would say you can even use that retrospectively for situations that have not gone quite well, so that you allow that time to come through and forgive yourself for perhaps not being quite as adept as you could have been. And the submodalities work exceedingly well for that as well. If you've been in a situation that's not been quite as good as you'd like it to, revisiting that and being able to put something better in place, you come away with a better perspective on it. So I've enjoyed doing that as well.
Yeah.
On the hypnotic language, that was something else in itself. That was great fun to do, I must admit. Yeah, I enjoyed doing that.
So Chrissy, all of it. All of it, really, by the sounds of it, Chrissy.
Yeah, I've had a good time with that.
What's great when you get into those hypnotic language patterns, and you get more familiar with them, is you can really free form. So, you know, you can just kind of let your unconscious take you off on a flight of fantasy. And of course, it's a rapport thing, so that if you are kind of in the mode of being really relaxed, then somebody else will follow you as well. So you can have lots of fun with that.
It's a good plan.
I am just to add a bit. Yeah, the techniques I've used. Done quite a lot of the submodalities. Again, brilliant. The perceptual positions I haven't practiced as much as I would like to, actually. I think because I think it's I love the idea, and the tiny bit I've done, it's been brilliant. The anchoring I've done quite a lot, which has gone really well. I think some of the, particularly part 1 stuff, I haven't really used as techniques as much as informing me about the client. So my beliefs about, you know, map of the world stuff ties in with other personality type stuff that I've done before, that, you know, everyone sees the world differently and is running different programs, and that's fine. So you're not, when you meet somebody either in life or in a coaching situation, they're highly unlikely to see the world like me. There will be differences, and that is just that understanding. It's not a technique, but it's an understanding. I think is just hugely valuable.
And John, just to emphasize on that one, that is one of your key things to focus on as a coach: understanding their map of the world.
Yeah. So that a lot of the part 1, I mean, the rapport building is just, you know, I suppose goes into that as well. You learn their rhythms of speech, the way their energy, the matching and pacing, all that stuff.
Yeah.
You know, it's not something they're aware of at all in terms of the technique. I think the part 2 stuff was more, you know, this is a thing we can try, let's do it. It's an exercise.
Yeah.
More than the part 1s, I think.
Yeah.
Having said that, the grow model is a very accessible one that you can use almost immediately with anybody.
Yeah.
And I think it's useful to remember how powerful it is for us to understand all that you said, John, about those principles of map of the world, understanding how we communicate, understanding our values and beliefs, how powerful they are. They are tools also to help in the education of other people. Sometimes just them understanding, you know, your coachee having an insight into the map of the world concept can help so much else, and they can then sort themselves out because they realize that person isn't getting at me. They're, you know, so all the bits that you've found useful yourself to understand are also tools to share, educate, explain, bring awareness about for your coachees as well.
And a lot of them are fascinated to learn about the theory. I mean, there's just stuff, and they love it, and they go, "Oh, that's interesting."
I mean, one thing that I do in my coaching sessions quite routinely is to share things like the ultimate success formula and the pyramid model, because that helps to give them a framework around which we can work with.
And a shared language and everything. Yeah. Okay, and moving on to Anita and Lala.
Right, well, I'll go first. For me, I find the hypnotic language and metaphors really great, really easy, it flows. I'm great with rapport and talking to people and, you know, clients. The things that I probably need to practice more is the exercises and processes that you do with a client, such as in like the values and beliefs and going through, you know, moving things up in order, prioritizing. The grow model and the well-formed outcome. I know what I want to achieve and I know what I want to get from the client, but it's just remembering those processes and not making it too much of an exercise on paper for the client, and just being able to adapt it in a really non-formal way or non-formal format. And I think if I practice with, someone else, then those are the areas that I probably practice on, because I think everything else flows. I think it's just remembering the techniques and the actual process itself, so that it just flows naturally, rather than I have to refer to a piece of paper or
And Lala, just to come in on that one, a couple of things really. It's perfectly okay, and we still do it, to work through a piece, to be looking at a piece of paper, and you can share that with the client. This is the process, and actually, some clients really like a formal process. They like the fact that, okay, what we're going to do today is a well-formed outcome, and I'm going to take you through these 10 steps. Here's step number 1. Some people really do like that. So again, that's where your flexibility comes in, I guess.
Yeah, I just think it's out of the norm for me. So to bring that into a practice and learn that concept.
Sure. Yeah.
A great idea struck me there, and I saw Kath nodding away in relation to us. We could have shared that list so you all had it to go into the rooms, but also just to have them all listed down.
Yeah.
I mean, there's so many tools and techniques we have. I mean, we're going to share one again later today with you, and it's like, oh, that's such a lovely exercise. When did I last use it with a client, sort of thing? Because there's so much. And so it is useful to just have a list for yourself sometimes, and once a month or something, just run through it all. Or when you've got a client who's presenting something different and you're not quite sure, because there could be however many different approaches to it. There isn't always a right or a wrong, and sometimes you'll get one that will sort out everything, or sometimes you'll apply a number of different ones through a process with people. And Anita, did you want to add anything?
Not too much, other than to say every single skill that we've learned is going to be so useful just within whatever we're doing in context, which is amazing. And I just agree with everything everyone else has said. I'd probably just mention a bit about the coaching practice, because some of us have done much more than others. I'm really new at doing it. And I found it really interesting. Like you said, there is no one way to do it. It's okay to get started. My problem is staying on track and making sure we finish somewhere in time, in a good place. But I think that will come with time, I hope. And I think I really value the kind of observational side, which is best. And if I'd had more time, I would have had more chance of getting more of that. But I'd just say to everybody, thanks for everything you've contributed. And if any of you want to carry on with any practice, I'd really appreciate it. But I'd want also some honest feedback, so that we can, I can kind of build on that part of it. I think the hypnotic language, the storytelling, the trance stuff doesn't come easily. I'm very much more factually based. So I like to know what's going to be going and to plan for something. And like Lala said, you can't plan for a lot of sessions. You just kind of go with it. So I think the practice is where it comes for letting me go a bit more fluently. But
and a lovely invitation, volunteering and inviting to continue that coaching practice as you move forward, to get more experience. Brilliant, lovely. Time, Kevin, we're
going to take a very quick break, I think, for those who need one leg stretch, etc., and then we'll come back and we'll wrap up with a few things.
Okay, so a 3-minute break, everyone. See you very soon.
Welcome back, everybody.
Okay, so now we're just going to share Joe's message to us all.
Hi, everybody. I just wanted to say I'm so sorry I can't be with you in person for this last session of our term. I wanted to wish you very well for the holiday season, whatever you choose to do, and I hope you enjoy it. And I hope to see everybody for our session 3 of our course whenever it happens. Although I haven't been with you, I've really enjoyed your company remotely. I've seen you on video for hours and hours and hours, of course. And although I've missed being part of the course in a very immediate way, I do feel very connected to it, and I've really appreciated some of the wise things that you have said and that I've learned from. So hope you have a good day today. Hope you have a good festive season. Bye-bye.
Oh, lovely. Super.
Fabulous. And the other thing we wanted to share with you today was a little piece that seemed very relevant to us, because we want to encourage you to put your skills into practice straight away. And sometimes a barrier for people is they're not sure that they know enough, or their skill set is enough for them to even start practicing. So this seemed a very relevant thing. Some of you may have seen this before. It's called playing the cello. Not many years ago, I began to play the cello. Most people would say that what I'm doing is learning to play the cello. But these words carry into our minds the strange idea that there exist two very different processes. Number one, learning to play the cello, and two, playing the cello. They imply that I will do the first until I have completed it, at which point I will stop the first process and begin the second. In short, I will go on learning to play until I have learned to play, and then I will begin to play. Of course, this is nonsense. There are not two processes, but one. We learn to do something by doing it. There is no other way.
Right. So some nice sentiments shared there. And what we're going to do now is share another lovely exercise that we'll probably work a bit more around in part 3, but it's called a short walk to congruence, and it's about helping ourselves to be more aligned in what we're doing and who we are. So for this exercise, I'm just going to set you up now. That sounds odd, setting you up. I'm going to encourage you to get ready for the exercise. We're going, ideally, and if you've got the space, because we'll speak nice and loudly, if you can stand up and have enough room and still hear us instruct you to take 5 steps and be able to turn around and take 5 steps back. If you can't do that physically in your space, we'll be inviting you to close your eyes and imagine yourself taking it forward. But with loads of these things, if you can do it somatically, it adds even extra power to the activity. So the choice is yours. And what you're going to do, whether you're doing it physically or otherwise, so those of you who are doing this, we're revisiting, as it were, the levels of the logical levels development pyramid. So we want your first step to be the environment, your second step to be behavior. We'll be reminding you all the way through. So your first step is environment, your second step behavior, your third step capabilities, your fourth step is values and beliefs, your fifth step identity. And in this exercise, we'll be inviting you to turn around and walk back through those steps as well. Okay.
And just to emphasize, this is an activity that we want you to experience, rather than the purpose is not for you to learn to facilitate it. You may do that as a byproduct, of course, but this is more about you experiencing it as a client, as it were.
So, and the reason we chose this for our final session is because it's that walk of congruence. We're wanting to encourage you to take on board all your coaching skills as part of who you are, as part of your identity. We're wanting you to consider when you're being coaching, and whatever that means in whatever context, when you are being the best coach you can be, with your available resources, with your available skills, with your intentions and well-being and everything in mind, you being the best coach you can be. That's the context we want to place this in. So Kevin's going to start off, and we'll alternate giving you instructions and directions. So just before you start, stand in that first spot where you are, before you step anywhere, and just allow yourself to relax and bring to mind just that intention that we're going to be exploring being that best coach you can be.
So take a first step into the environment space. And as you do that, ask the question, where, when, and with whom do you want to be the best coach you can be?
That's right. And now take that second step into the behavior space. And now you're in that behavior space. What do you need to do? What actions do you take in this space and time and with those people?
And now take a step forward into the capability space. What skills or capabilities do you need in order to do these actions in those times and places with those people?
And now take another step forward into the values and beliefs space. What beliefs do you have or need to guide you when you are doing these things? And what is important to you about doing these things?
And finally, take a step forward into the identity space. And ask yourself, who are you if you have those beliefs and values and use those capabilities to carry out those actions in those places and times with those people?
And while you're in that identity space, perhaps you notice an image, a symbol, a feeling, a sound, something present itself that seems to symbolize that identity of being that best coach that you are. And I invite you to turn around in that identity space and take a first step, bringing with you that symbol, that image, that sound, whatever it is for you, and bringing that back with you into the beliefs and values space. And take time to notice how this enhances and enriches your original feelings of beliefs and values, now that you're bringing that aligned identity back with you.
And now take another step back into the capability space, bringing with you that strengthened identity and those stronger representations of your beliefs and values, and experience now how they strengthen, change, or maybe enhance the capabilities you experience within yourself.
And take another step now into that behavior space. And notice how even the smallest behaviors are a reflection of all of the higher levels, a reflection of your capabilities, your beliefs, your values, and your identity. And notice the impact in that behavioural space.
And then finally, take those enhanced representations and take a step back into that environment space. And notice how the situation is different now.
And now, as we finish that activity, I want you just to gently come back to your space, but notice what is different for you as you consider yourself as a coach. And perhaps take a seat again. And perhaps there's some dawning that you want to, first and foremost, maybe note down. Maybe that image, that symbol, you just want to, for some of us, make a note of it. Others of us don't need to do that. We just carry it with us all the time. But it might be nice to have a little reminder of it. And then just in a few moments, if anyone wants to share how that exercise was for them in terms of their alignment and congruence in relation to themselves as someone doing the best they can do in the coaching capacity. Okay. Does anyone want to share any observations or differences they noticed, or just their reflections on the experience for them?
It's a great way of proactively using those levels within that model. And you can use that, what we call the short walk to congruence, to help people become more aligned with whatever it might be. We've obviously done that in a coaching context here.
Mark?
Yeah, I think I would observe that that chose a good subject, not as another matter, but I found going back through it that I probably changed my aspect, probably from a slightly defensive, slightly sort of nervous state about where people were, to actually thinking I had a much stronger vision of where we might be able to help them get to. So I think it was quite, I didn't expect it to change very much, but it did change quite a bit, I think, in terms of actually putting the earlier steps in context of I wouldn't say the destination, because it's a journey, all that sort of, where we might want to go. So yeah, I thought it was quite interesting.
Lovely, Mark. Thank you for sharing. That's really great. Anyone else?
Okay, let's
I was just going to say thank you, because it was just very affirming of, this is the right track.
Yeah,
great. Yeah, and it was interesting. It didn't change in substance, but it changed in intensity on the way back. Just reinforced it, so that was great.
Fabulous.
Yeah, it's great to hear that affirmation there.
Brilliant.
Good. Okay, so a few more things just to finish off. We wanted to give you some sort of very practical thoughts in terms of next steps. And one question that some of you may have is about the question of how do I actually get some coachees? For some of you in an organizational context, that might be easier, maybe.
And I suppose we were, clients was the word I think that people were posing, but like Jane said earlier, coaching might be quite not so easy in that formal sense. And Joan, you might want to have that experience of having sort of sit down sessions. So maybe it is about letting people know you have these skills. Which is true, whoever it is. You know, there isn't, in terms of paying clients in that world of professional delivery of coaching, there isn't a magic bullet as far as we're aware. We've tried all sorts of different techniques, and some work better than others. We know that some work better for some people than they worked for us as we were extending our things, but we'll share what we do a little bit and continue to give you some tips. But one of the key things I think is, following on from that short walk to congruence, is that you are a coach. You're not learning to be a coach. You can coach. You have lots of tools, and letting people know that. If it's a matter of putting it on your CV now, that might be a small bit, but for within the organization context, within your colleagues, friends, family, whatever networks you have, let people know. Because for the majority, I mean, you can see the power of that you have in your hands to help other people. And if that is a driver for you and your purpose, it's almost, it reminds me of, and I've forgotten the lady's name, it's not, you've got a light to shine. You've got a skill to share. And I think it's beholden on you to help other people, but that's just my beliefs and where I come from. But if you do want to make that difference to other people, the first thing is to be proud of the fact that you have coaching skills, you are a coach, and you have the intention of helping others. And so being present and people knowing that is key. And it's interesting how opportunity, serendipity, whatever you might call it, happen when you've been bold enough and courageous enough to introduce yourself as someone who coaches and helps people get more of what they want, or however you want to language what you're doing. In some practical sense, for those of you who are doing the professional route, and I mentioned it to a couple of people we were talking to, would like to introduce you to someone who we joined our NLP forums. You know, we do don't know what we'll do now, but we moved on to NLP Connect during lockdown. But prior to that, we used to have monthly meetings of people interested in NLP, and someone who attended that and is fab is someone called Zoe Thompson, and she does she's a very personable person. She has her own practice in terms of these modalities is hypnotherapy, but what she's done is she's developed a program to help people in terms of their marketing, setting up a new business, encouraging people in terms of their confidence, taking small steps when it's appropriate rather than being bombarded by the whole social media world, but making progress and going for it. So she runs some lovely programs. She offers so many resources absolutely free of charge. You can sign up to her mailings. What she has is a group of people she works with. She responds to what they want help with, and when she's helped them, then she packages videos and helpful hints and tips and shares with you. So one way or another, getting in touch, looking at her website will be very useful. So we'll share all of that detail on the online. And Chrissy, do you know Zoe at all? I wondered if you might have worked with her or already.
No, I met her on a couple of the meetings that you had that were still physical, so I remember her from then. And she is an impressive lady and very, very approachable.
And
so I
very generous of her time and her knowledge and everything. So I would suggest for any of you, or any of you want to tag it on as a sideline, if you want to carry on expanding through the corporate world. So there's that one. And just on another basis, because I know it's not appropriate to all of you, is the coaching directory is where we put ourselves, and basically it's certainly, I think all the time we've been there, at least covered the cost, the fee of being on there. But talking to, I think it was Lala I was chatting to yesterday, I came to the idea, which I think is a useful one. Between Kevin and I, we're going to talk to them and see if we could get you an introductory, you know, for a few months or half price or something. We can only ask, and if that happens, brilliant. If it doesn't happen, we'll still share the details. And in our experience of other ones we've tried, that's the most useful in terms of that publicity. And prime for all of that, you are NLP. You now know lots about NLP, and it may be useful in whatever walk of life you're taking the NLP forward, to join up to ANLP International, who is the professional membership and accreditation body that we're assigned to. So it is a membership body for a lot of their services. There is a fee to pay. Again, we'll share you more details on that. There is a directory listing in there. So depending what level membership you get, you'll be listed by locality and the type of coaching you do. They do a fabulous annual conference, and Kevin, we ought to certainly share an update on that. Has anyone already signed up? Maybe Chrissy again, maybe. Anyone signed up for this year's conference? Just a hand up yet, Chrissy. Worthwhile in terms of the spread of things it covers, and so we'll share the detail again. It's online this time, so you have access to all the recordings. Last time it was for 6 months, and of course last year we got our award at that occasion, and they do
this
that
year.
This year,
not last year.
The last NLP conference earlier this year. We got a thing. So they do, you know, they're out there seeing NLP happen and have great case studies and people who are working in different fields and connections you can make if you want to specialize in particular areas. There's that whole networking, and they have a rapport magazine that always has.
And some great speakers this year, I understand.
Some great speakers, including Mr. Downsworth, and also in the Rapport magazine, you've been making good contributions to that, and you've got an ongoing series starting, have you, Kevin?
Next one, yeah.
Next one, and it's all about NLP and philosophy, because he wasn't going to tell you. So how exciting and interesting is that? Okay, so that's some sort of practical that we'll give you more details on, and pick up the phone, send us an email, do whatever else if we can help you in that way.
We'll put a brief consolidation module on from today, with some of these details for you to access as well.
Yeah, and given were we just going to say about part 3, just to remind people?
Yeah.
So we're not. Oh, sorry.
Go on.
I just speak faster than you, and I know we want to do some. So part 3, we've got some of the topics there. I think for all of you, we've had a bit of a conversation of where you're at in terms of wanting to continue. At the moment, the general consensus is not too soon. Yes, it sounds interesting. Some of you, even though you're not wanting to do coaching per se as a profession, can see the benefit of exploring more things about the way we work, the way we act, and the way we communicate, and the way knowing more to influence. Most people are very keen on some opportunity to see people face to face, whether it was just a social sometime in the coming year, or if it's part of a 1 or 2 days of the part 3 to actually be an in-person session, obviously COVID and everything permitting. So we've had individual chats just to see where you're at on that. We'll be consolidating that and continuing to share information as swiftly as possible. In terms of completing part 2, most of you are doing pretty well. I know there's some recordings and some reviews to do. We hope to have it all tidy and cleaned up by the 31st of December, as we said originally. If you need an extension, let us know and we'll extend it past that. We'll get your certificate sorted and delivered to you for that aspect. And the system will be up. We'll continue there. It'll be there for at least 6 months into June. 6 months it will be there available, and we will do our best to carry on responding to you. We get less prone to going in on a regular basis the further away we are from the course finish date, but it will be there for you, and that's it, I think.
Yeah, so when you've finished all the bits and pieces, we'll be sort of processing your accreditation as an NLP coach. So have we got any sort of questions on the logistics, John?
Just on the jigsaw box, you say it'd be there for 6 months. After that, is it the chance it might disappear? Do we need to download everything? That's my question, really.
We wouldn't disappear it without giving you prior warning.
Right.
It's there as long as we continue using it. We just warn you that there's a potential after a period of about 6 months, you might get a notice of it coming down if we're choosing not to continue with the system. We won't take it down as long as we're subscribed to Jigsaw Box.
Yeah, and that's been there for a number of years now. So.
And we definitely won't let it go down overnight without giving you warning of at least a month, let's say.
Yeah.
Now I've just made a commitment, Kevin, note that. So it's all about completing.
Still got the stuff from autumn 2019, the Acevo.
The Kivo.
Yeah.
Kivo one I did, yes, that's still there at the moment.
Yeah, indeed.
Everything that's there is available as long as we've still got that platform operating, but we do like to warn people. We can't say it's there for infinity, because we might at some point decide we don't want to subscribe.
Yeah.
Okay.
The other thing that I don't know if you mentioned that, Rita, we are planning to start some sort of what we call a coaching circle, and that's really about providing you with a touch point, some supervision. So what we're looking at doing is having some kind of group setting, and it might be monthly for an hour, let's say, where we come together and you can share what you've been doing in coaching. You can ask advice from us. You can share stories, encourage each other. And within that sort of package, we'll also offer some one-to-one supervision and coaching from Rita and myself as well. So if anybody's interested in having that kind of backup for you there, then we'll send you some details of that as well.
So we're very nearly completing.
We are, and it's an interesting that how do we know when something has actually been completed? That's always an interesting question, really, isn't it? So just a few things really to say in conclusion. So I knew I'd been to the summit, and as I headed down, I saw this figure dressed in red coming towards me. And I knew that there was still one unanswered question. But before I could ask it, he asked me a question, which took me by surprise. And he said to me, "Have you seen my wife?" And he said, "We come up here every day to collect litter. And I was wondering if she was still up there on the summit." I'd told him that I hadn't seen her, so he carried on his way. And I knew at that point that I would have to answer my own question myself. So I carried on down. And I went down and down and down. And then I hit the water with a splash. I'd done it. I'd summoned up all my resources. I'd climbed up there in the first place. I made it to the end. And then I jumped off with a mix of confidence and curiosity. And that sense of elation when I came back up out of the water and I saw all those smiling faces just fill me with pride in what I'd achieved. So for one more time, I dipped down. And as I dipped down, there indeed was the finish line. And I knew that all of the other runners were there or thereabouts. But it was clearly me who was in first position. I'd completed what I set out to achieve. There was the winning post. But then an unexpected thing happened. the two people that were holding the finishing tape ran off laughing down the beach. Everyone fell to the ground exhausted, not amused at all. Everyone, that is, except me. I gave chase to those two comedians and I caught them up and I broke that tape. Then I knew I'd finished in the proper way. I turned around and I gave a victory salute and I went on to claim my prize. The look on my daughters' faces when they received their stick of rock was priceless.
And finally, now we know that everything has been completed, we can say thank you one and all for such a glorious learning journey we've shared.
And one thing just to add, when we started our journey here, we started with this idea that we wanted to train up a number of people that go out into the world and help and support others, particularly at this time of the pandemic. So, you know, we feel that we've achieved our outcome with your help in that. And it's been great to witness the progress that you all have made over this year-long program.
Indeed. So on that note, if anyone has anything they want to say, or if you want to just say thank you one and all, and I look forward to continuing contact, and we look forward to continuing our learning journey with you in one way or another. And so we wish you all the season's joys, Yuletide, whatever that is for you, and looking forward to seeing you again soon.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you very much.
Bye,
Thank
everyone.
you.
Thank you.
Everyone.
Thanks, Rachel and Kevin.
Very welcome.
Thank you.
Bye for now.
Bye.
Bye.